everyone for coming. I'm Hayden Vandenberg. I'm the new Agrarian Programs Northern Plains Coordinator. And I'm located in Roundup, Montana. Julie came up with this and helped me put this together. And I just think it's going to be a really fun topic, learning about teams that thrive. So let's see. So I think everyone here knows what our new agrarian program is. And we are, hoping to maybe bring on a couple more mentors. And just a reminder, applications start in November. So so if you don't mind, if you are able to put your camera on, that's really great for our speakers to be able to see your faces. They're just going to be talking to us, so faces are great. You can rename yourself if you'd like. It's the 3 dots at the top of your picture. If we could remain muted, but if you have a question, please jump in. I think both these speakers are open to answering questions as they're speaking. Let's just enjoy it. Today, we have Oxbow Cattle Company. Bart and Wendy own it, and Natalie is their manager. And this year they have their first new agrarian program, apprentice Kara, who's also joining them today. I'm really excited to learn from them. And our very own Julie Sullivan, who is our NAP mentor support specialist, pretty much our support in general, and one of the founding mentors of our program. And she also has a really unique ranch team. Her and her husband own a ranch, and have 2 co-managers and an apprentice as well. So yes, we're really excited to learn from both of them. And I'm going to turn it over to Oxbow. I'll stop sharing and let Oxbow start, and then we'll go to Julie.
All right, we're going to have Bart lead us off, and then we're all kind of join in.
Okay. So this is, I guess, I feel like we have a really good team. We're very lucky to have that here. And I guess from what I think of, this is just speaking for me and where I come from and how I approach the team that we have here. And the first thing is, like, the most valuable teams I've been a part of always had great leadership. And I think that's where it all starts. And so that's one of the things I really try to work on is leadership. And I also try to do it by example, not just by dictation, because I don't think that works. It never worked for me. The other thing is I try to follow the golden rule, treat others how I'd like to be treated. And I try to remember where I was at when people, or when I was at other people's shoes at different stages of my life, even though you really forget. And then the other big thing that we really have here, and Wendy's the one that brought this home, was the vow of responsibility. And we can share that with everybody. It's really I guess if there's problems or if there's issues or if there's things going on, the first place one needs to look is really in the mirror, and then go from there. And I don't always do that from the get-go. Of course, I'm human, and I have emotions in that, but really trying to look at what I caused. Like if there's issues with whether it's Natalie or Kara or Wendy, really what I should do is I should look at what I caused to put us in this situation to begin with. That's easier said than done, and I don't always do that. The other thing is, like, I think it's really critical to address problems before they get too big to handle. And I really try to do that. Like if there's any kind of, like, you can just feel kind of things coming up or that, I try to head them off before they get too big. Do I always get that done? No, but really try to do that. Another thing is we try to check in and see how people are doing and really mean it. One of the things Wendy has us do, which is I think a really cool thing and really positive, is when we're sitting around, she'll ask us what our rose, bud, and thorn is. And the rose is the great thing that happened. The bud is what you're looking forward to, and the thorn is, of course, the thorn. And then the other thing is letting everybody be human. and make mistakes and have bad days. I'm not good at letting people have bad days, but I really try to do that. I'm working on that. And then the other thing is we really try to have fun and eat lots of good food together. I think that's important to bring us together and slow down, because we work really hard and lots of hours. And if we can sit and eat some food together, and that's when you can kind of decompress and all that. And the other thing I know is when things really start to unravel with us, it's because we haven't been planning. We've just been reacting. And so we try to have Monday morning meetings where we all sit down, and it drives me crazy a lot of times because it takes what I'm thinking should be a 15-minute meeting will take 2 hours. But usually what that does is that keeps us solid and going good. And what we do is we plan out the next 4 weeks. We look 4 weeks ahead. We find out when people are planning vacations or big things like that, or days off. And then we try to plan the day and the week. And Natalie's been taking the lead on all that, which has been great. But I guess that's kind of just thinking about what makes our team click, and from my responsibility in that's the kind of things that I use to try to navigate it. And now Wendy can tell you all the things that she disagrees with that. And Natalie can tell you all the things that I do wrong, and Kara can tell you all the things I do wrong too. So I'll leave it up to them now.
Well, I'll chime in, and Bart talked about one thing that I was going to bring up was the rosebud thorn. And I think one way that we're a strong team, and what I think of is, because I'm kind of in and out, I'm there a lot and not there a lot. And so keeping up with the team for me is something that is intentional, and ways that we do that is really checking in with each other. And when we have a day or a production day, I call it recapping, and that's kind of our rosebud thorn. Like, looking back, we're riding in the truck together. Like, what was your favorite thing about the day? What was the worst thing about the day? What are you looking forward to? And that just, gets people in touch with how people are thinking. And it's really interesting because sometimes, like, what my rose for the day was some really awesome move I had on my horse, but somebody else's rose was like, I worked a cow that I'd never, seen that cow move that way before. And I worked on my stockmanship. And so it's a good way to learn about people. And I think it connects you in another way, because you just learn kind of how people function. I think one thing I bring to our team is trying to bring some of that insight into how people learn, how people interact, and, introverts versus extroverts, and trying to recognize how people fit into a team, because not everybody functions in the same role. And so really working to people's strengths, and you can try to improve weaknesses, but if you work within people's strengths and encourage that, you're going to see so much more blossoming of someone. And then baby steps in weaknesses, I think makes for a better balanced team. One thing we implemented this year was we really honed in on areas of responsibility and position agreements. And what I think that does for a team is it gives people onus and buy-in. And so even though Bart and I have been here a long time, Natalie's been with us for a while now, Kara was coming into our team and starting from ground zero. But we started out by giving her some responsibility and having expectations for her that were meetable, but it let her own something. And so that makes you feel like a valued member of a team. A couple other things we've done, and this is Natalie's credit. So Bart stole one of my things. I'm going to steal one of Natalie's. Is we put our goals on a board. So we have our team meeting, and when I'm not present, everybody does a good job of communicating with me what happened in the meeting if I'm not there. And so we have a text string where we all text each other together, just what's going on. They take a picture of the calendar, say, here's what's happening, so I know I'm on board. So we kind of keep that dialogue going even if I'm not there. And we put our goals up on the board. And it's not necessarily related to work. It's whatever your personal goals are or work related goals or whatever it is. And we all write it up there individually so that we understand as humans, as not just employees of Oxbow, what people are working towards in their life and try to help support that. And then when we have another meeting, we check in and say, how's it going with your goals? Give some accountability and creates a humanness to our workplace. So those are the things off the top of my head that I can think of. Happy to chime in more, but I'll let Natalie and Kara share their experiences.
Yeah, so I guess I also wanted to preface this with saying, like, we are a really good team and we all get along really well and stuff, but we're definitely not a perfect team. And like, I don't know if that exists. And I think it's important to share what works for us, but also where we need, I guess, where there's always room for improvement. And I think to me, like, why did they ask us to do this call? Because like, we're definitely not a perfect team, and there's plenty of other people. But I think for me, like, just to start off mushy gushy is that like, we all love each other, you know, and whether we like don't get along sometimes and have bad days, like that's kind of the foundation of it all. And I think what Bart and Wendy said kind of lead into that and how we've like created like that relationship. Anyway, so okay, so Hayden sent some questions that I kind of went through just to make sure we touch all the points that we should be touching. But so one of the questions was, what makes you a team and not coworkers? And I think the biggest thing for me is like being vulnerable and opening up about personal issues, because I've been in other jobs I've had where it's just strictly like a boss employee relationship. Like I would never share personal parts of my life, but I do now. I tell these guys literally everything just because like the nature of this work is like so intimate and close that like you can't not, it'll come out one way or another. So you might as well just like, Jesus, from the get-go. You might as well from the get-go just kind of be vulnerable. And I'm kind of like, I wear my heart on my sleeve, do I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't go 5 minutes without somebody here being like, what's wrong? And Kara too. I mean, she kind of like, it's easy to tell when something's wrong, and then you just say like one thing and she opens up, which is why I think she has really fit in with our team. Okay, what do you do when someone is struggling? So if it's a personal issue, this is kind of something I'm working on. Like I've always not been the best at like confrontation or direct speaking, like super directly with somebody, especially when I know it's personal. Like I don't want to overstep any boundaries, but I found that it's better to just like go for it. Even sometimes it's like comes out awkward. Like I look down at my feet and I'll literally ask Bart if he's sad. I'm like, that's not like the most professional way to go about it, but I'm like, okay, I can sense something's wrong. Let's just like talk about it. And what I found, like, if you give somebody like that branch, they kind of immediately take it and then like start talking about what's going on. And then from once you get all that out of the way, it's like, okay, now we can actually work because you got that out of the way, which I think is really important. And then I also, when someone's struggling like with a work issue, like being overworked or burnt out, that I definitely need to work on. I don't really have any answer and I don't really know what to do, honestly. Yeah, so if someone has anything to share for that, that would be great. Okay, and then how do we humanize the workplace? Bart and Wendy have shared like what they do to make this just not, you know, all work all the time. We eat out a lot. I made this like employee of the week sign. Oh, yeah. That's just like randomly when someone does something cool, we'll put their picture up there. Usually it's just funny, but it's kind of like I've been at once and I still like, I felt kind of cool for that week. And then they take, like we went Huckleberry. We had so much work to do a couple weeks ago, but we just left one afternoon and went huckleberry picking just because like it was now or never, and that was really awesome. And then we go riding in the hills for a day, just like teamwork stuff. And I think it must be hard for the Bart and Wendy to schedule that stuff because there's so much to do, but just like doing it, I think is really important. How do you make sure everyone is informed and on the same page? We use our group text a lot. And I've found this, I've definitely struggled with. Like, I don't want to bother people, or I want my bosses to think I'm capable and don't always need to like ask them questions. But I found that it's always better to err on the side of communication, just like over communicate. Is kind of I would say what we do. Like, we're always texting each other.
When there's some issues, it's usually a lack of communication.
Always, literally always.
And so that communication is critical.
Yeah. And it's kind of harder. Sometimes it's harder in a small group. Like, sometimes I feel like there's too many cooks in our kitchen when it's like it's only 4 of us, and we all want like a say in the decision making. And so if like a decision is made really quickly, I get kind of pissy. Like, I think I threw a fit the other day to Wendy. I'm like the 3 of them made a decision just because it had to be made or whatever. And I was driving somewhere else, and I was like, so that's like something that I probably need to work on too, just because it can feel like we all like, it's all hunky dory. We're all making decisions, but at the same time, sometimes it can, you have to step back a little bit. Okay, yeah, then they both talked about our Monday meetings. We start with the calendar week, and then we have the list of the big rocks. I think that's a ranching for profit term.
Yeah.
It's just like the main things other than like making sure animals are alive. It's like the big things we need to get done that week, like haul finishers, price beef, grab finishers, move low cows, set up next polywire for mom, just like the big rocks. And then we take those rocks and put them onto the calendar week, so we kind of know like what every day looks like. Yeah, goal setting, rosebud, thorn. And if we skip a weekly meeting, like, things go more or less go to shit, honestly. It's really, yeah, it's bad. So like even this morning, like, this is why we're not where we're supposed to be, because we met this morning, and so that just like staggered our day. Okay, last one. What makes your team thrive? My number one thing is laughter. Like, we just laugh all the time. And it's really fun.
Not all the time.
No, we don't laugh all the time. We don't laugh all the time. Kara laughs all the time.
We're working on trying to get her to quit laughing.
Yeah. We just all have some like allow for humor, I guess. Okay, and then another thing that's like more for me is Bart gives these, I call them talking tos. And they've happened to me like when I'm kind of losing steam, or like he can tell before I can that I'm kind of like I'm not doing my job well for some reason or another, and usually it's a personal issue that I'm not even aware of. And so Bart will step in and be like, they're kind of scary, honestly, but he's kind of like, hey, you didn't do this, and this. I see you slacking in this way, that way, and this way, and I need you to step up because this, and this. And like in the moment it's hard, but like to work for someone who cares enough about me to like challenge me, and who cares enough about like my career and help me get through that and get to the like above that, has been so awesome. And now I'm used, I haven't had one, well, maybe it's time, but
because you're kicking ass
now. It's like whenever I get them, I know like on the other side I'm just going to be like way better, higher than before then. And so to have someone who can like he does it with empathy, but also lights a fire under my butt to be like, like he'll be like, put your big girl pants, put your cowgirl pants. He says cowgirl, like, I don't know. You have a way of using these terms where I'm like, all right, you got to step up, Natalie, it's time. Okay. And then the last one is we go to a lot of clinics together. Not a lot, but we've gone to like 2 big ones. because so much of the work we do together is like this really hard stuff, stockmanship, horsemanship, grass assessment. And we all go learn together with these like really amazing guru types. And then we can come back and like be all on the same page and have equal understanding of each other's expectations, which is critical. That's all I have. Kara.
I would just like
Can I
to
say-
comment on Bart's talking to, because they never go so well with me because we're married.
Yeah, you can't.
No, those
It
don't
doesn't
work
go so
out.
well.
The only thing I was gonna say too is like to dive into leadership a little more is like leadership comes from all levels. I believe it's not just me, it's not just Wendy, but it's Natalie and it's Kara too. And I think we hopefully try to promote that here and try to take that and everybody works on their leadership and it evolves in that aspect. So we try to push that through. The other thing is I'm a true believer that not all teams are gonna work. And the more I do this and the more I'm around having folks and being part of teams is if they're not working, I think sometimes the best thing you can do is just cut ties and move on. I think there is truly that. Like you can't make every team into the one we have right now. I think the one we have right now is really special. And I mean, I think that's something to really think and be aware of is not all of them. We may never have as special a team as we have right now again. And that may just be reality because personalities, where people are at in their life at that time, and so many other things are going on that weighs into it. So I just wanted to say that. And now we're leaving the best for last.
Nah. I'll be brief. I'll just say that I think like what makes us really special is that like I think I know at the end of the day, like whether I had this job or not, like these people support me 100% and like they back me because they like me as a person and not just like as a laborer, you know. Like we have like all like personal genuine connections, which makes like our whole team just flow so much better. And so like I just know that they have my back 100% here, like at work, and like 100% in my personal life. And so that's really nice, and that's made it really, really strong.
Yeah.
If you get in a bar fight, we got you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think I guess that we're just kind of talking about how much we like each other, but I don't know how, like, I guess we just got lucky. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because, well, I mean, yeah.
You make your own luck. It's my dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the feeling of like wanting to hang out with a coworker outside of work and it not being a chore is like really special and not really something that I feel a lot. But I think that's like kind of what I will be looking for from now on. And I think that's what we used when we interviewed Kara. It's like I would hang out with her outside of work, and we do.
The other thing I think is like two of the really strongest things that we have going for us right now is what Wendy and Natalie have. And Wendy and Natalie really know themselves, and they really know what they want in life, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that helps drive us in certain ways. And I think it helps us keep us focused. And it also helps us choose the right people, aka Kara.
On that note, Bart and Wendy, what do you guys look for when you are hiring? Because like you said, you've had good luck, but also I think you're probably doing a great job at interviewing. And yeah, I'm curious of how you are building your team and what you're looking for in interviews and applications.
I think one thing we do is we're really, really honest about the job. We try to be as honest as we can be because it's hard. And what we have a ton of plates in the air and a ton of things we do, and we try to explain that as much as we can so that when somebody comes, they have as good of an idea as they can what they're getting into, so that we don't have somebody come that's not happy. And then we really do, I think it feeds into kind of the team we have, and to, you know, that humanity and knowing somebody and having somebody's back. We ask questions like, what's the last book? What book are you reading? What are the last 3 books you read? What do you do in your spare time? So that we know if we're like, you know, aligned in any ways, not that you have to be, but it makes it easier to become a cohesive team if you have some alignment in like interests, or you can support, you know, what people are interested in outside of work. And then the other thing I think that's super important for us is a learning mindset. And so, and you can kind of gain that from an interview, just in how people talk about interests, and, you know, what they're reading tells you a lot. Are they, you know, is it a romance novel, or is it a, you know, history of Lewis and Clark or something? And so learning mindset's huge to us, because we see ourselves as lifelong learners. And if you're not in that mindset, you're stagnant. And so I think that's something we try to get out of interviews. Natalie can say if that's bullshit or not.
No, it is. I don't remember. Yeah, we definitely asked those questions. I remember when we were interviewing apprentices.
The biggest thing for me is interviewing folks is, you know, like the interviews are one thing. The biggest thing for hiring folks to me is talking to past references, and not just the people that they put on there. In fact, if I know people that know them and they aren't on their reference sheet, those are the people I really talk to. And when I do talk to the people, their references, I ask them to be, what I tell them is like, I tell them, all right, I've been a reference for a lot of people, and not everything with this person is 100% great. I can promise you that, because I've worked with everybody and myself. If everybody was honest about me, I'm not 100% great all the time. But what I usually ask them is, I was like, what if there was any issues with this person, or anything that made you pause, or any questions you had, just please tell me that. This is just between you and me. And it's just a reference check. And that's one of the things that really tells me a lot about when I'm hiring folks. So I guess if you're putting references down on your application and that, I guess at this point in my life, I would tell these folks, my references, to tell everything and share everything about me. Because like if somebody told me that like when I called them and I referenced them, and they said, yeah, you may be calling them, and they told me to share everything, the good, bad, and ugly, I would I would be really interested in having that person on my team, because they're like looking at like, yeah, I do have a bad and ugly side, because we all do. It doesn't mean that we're not the right fit of that. It means just we're human. And so if we can, you know, and sometimes when people think the bad and the ugly is really horrible, it's actually really just minimal. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's a big thing in reference checks and looking at folks and that. So
Yeah, that was great. Kara, I have a question for you. I'm wondering what it was like to join a team that was already really close knit. Was it kind of intimidating, like they were already a family, or was it easy to just join in the family? Like, what was that dynamic when you first got there?
It definitely like took me a little bit to like kind of open up more and like get in the groove of like being on the team and stuff. But I would say like, I mean, overall they were super welcoming, like really wanted me there and really wanted to teach and like help me understand things, which is really nice. But I think it was just more personally for me, like it took me longer to get in the groove of things with them as a team. But that's just my personality. But I'd say overall it was really positive, like from the beginning, I guess.
Yeah, it takes a while. I kind of had that same thing. Like they had their family with Caroline, who they loved and I love as a friend. And it's like, it took me a while to like have enough confidence to be like, hey, now you're part of this team and you guys are different people and it's a different Oxbow. And it's just different and it's okay. And it will never be that. And that will never be this. But that is kind of hard. I definitely struggled with that for a while.
And I think that just speaks to what a small team we have. Like, you know, sometimes I'm sure some of the other ranches have a lot more people and diversity, which creates its own benefits and, you know, challenges. And so, but speaking to what Natalie just spoke to about who we hire and how we hire, I mean, part of it is, I mean, Caroline helped us in recruiting Natalie. And so, you know, that connection beyond your ranch and those relationships you build, it kind of helps bring people back to you. It's kind of that full circle there. You put it out there and it comes back to you in other ways. So that definitely helped in our team building that we had with Caroline, brought in another awesome team member.
Yeah, pause here if anyone has any questions for Oxbow, and if you think of them at the end, we can ask at the end too. Okay, well, feel free to speak up at the end too. But I'm gonna go ahead and let Julie go ahead and share a little bit of her team dynamics.
I have to, it was really great hearing the Oxbow team talk, because I think so much of what they have found really helps them succeed, or things that I have also found have helped us succeed. And, you know, George and I have been taking apprentices for 14 years. So I think one of the things that we've learned is that kind of like the Oxbow folks were saying, sometimes you end up with this amazing situation and everybody really gels and you gel quickly and there's a lot of respect and camaraderie and like-mindedness. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And so if you know that you're going to be an operation which either periodically brings in new people, or you have people who've been with you for a while and you know they're going to leave because professionally or personally they need to move on, like how do you, I've thought a lot about like how do you create systems or processes that are going to work even when you don't have that perfect match. And I think a lot of the things that Kara and Natalie and Bart and Wendy shared are the things that I've found we really rely on. So, so the things like a weekly meeting when we make sure that we have a timekeeper. And one of the reasons we have a timekeeper on that is over the years, we've discovered that in some of our teams, that rather than it being a team meeting, it starts to become a debate between two people who are particularly strong personalities or particularly kind of extroverted personalities. And everybody else in the team feels like they could have gotten on a plane and gone to France and nobody would have even noticed. So that can make people feel really disrespected. They feel like their time is being disrespected. So I think that those meetings are really, really, really valuable. And one of the reasons that I was asked to be on this call is because I can talk about the dark underbelly of teams and what we do when things aren't going well. So that's one of the things we've learned is that that weekly team meeting, just like the Oxbow folks said, when we do it, when we really do it and we do it well, we are so much stronger. And as much as it feels like Bart said, it feels like you're taking time away. I like to think of it more as like I was a preschool teacher for a while. And if I didn't take the time to make sure a kid knew how to put on their own shoes, they were never going to make it to recess. And so taking that time for a week or two to help a kid learn how to put on their own shoes rather than have the teacher do it for them, that was taking the time to invest in somebody so that they have the capacity to take responsibility and ownership. And so I think that team meeting, when you're bringing new people into your operation or young people who want to move into management, taking the time is a real investment in them as well as in you, in figuring out how do I transfer the complexity of an operation to someone who wants to do this for their life. And that's it's a gesture of respect and love, really, to the people who are working with you, to be willing to take that time to get everybody on the same page. So a timekeeper is a really, really good, a good thing. One of the other things that we've found with teams and team meetings, because George and I have been married for 22 years. And so we've been running the ranch together. And like Wendy said, like we have our own patterns that can emerge in a team meeting, which are not particularly useful or fun for other people. Sam and Noelle, who were apprentices with us and are now our assistant managers here, they're also a couple. So anyone who joins our team is working with two couples. And so that's a dynamic that anybody is entering to. So one of the things that I think is also really valuable, if you know you're going to be having people rotating into your team, is figure out what are the dynamics that already exist that are positive, as well as the places where you annoy the pants off of each other, and be really willing to name that up front, even in the interview process. Like, we try to be really clear about the fact that there are times when the squabble as a couple ends up emerging in a team meeting. And is that going to be and we want people to know that we know that happens, and we want people to let us know when that is impacting them, so that we can clean up the work environment and not have the couple dynamic kind of polluting the system for the person who's not a member of the couple. So whether you have couples on your team or not, I do think figuring out, like, what's your pattern? Do you know that some of you like to have a 3-hour meeting with a lot of coffee, and somebody else gets really antsy after 45 minutes, and you're trying to find the balance? Figure out what your kind of patterns are, and be really sort of transparent about that, so people know what they're getting into. And if that's a problem for them, then they can name it, because I think it is really hard to enter into a team that's already been in existence for a number of years. A couple of other just things that we do that are systems, kind of adding on to what the Oxbow team said. One of the things that was a real eye-opener for me, I think it was about a year ago, the new Agrarian program staff did a training with a woman. And one of the things, and she asked us, she said, when things are kind of going haywire, what do you think is the core reason for that? And there was like this list of 6 things, are there systems that are a problem? Is it an interpersonal dynamic? Or people personally burnt out? Like, what is the core factor here? And we all guessed that it was either interpersonal conflict and complications and communication issues, or it was people like being burnt out or exhausted or unhappy in their job. And she said, no, actually 94% of what goes wrong in any situation is a system problem. We think it's us as people, but it's actually that our systems aren't helping our people thrive. Our systems aren't helping our people be their most productive, healthy, whole selves. So that's part of really about too. I think a lot of family ranches just kind of, it's almost like they emerge from the ground and they don't really necessarily have named systems to communicate and make sure people are all on the same page. And I think that's why sometimes those operations can be really hard to work for as the family, as well as for people coming into the family, is that nobody's really aware of how information gets transferred. Nobody's really aware of how things get decided. And so I just wanted to name that, because I think so much of what Oxbow was talking about are these things that they're systems. We're going to have a check-in. We have rosebud and thorn. It's actually, these are things that make your life easier. But if you don't already have systems, it can feel like a big lift to create them. So one of the things I just wanted to, I'm going to see if I can show it to you, is similar to what you all said. Can you see, this is like our whiteboard that we have in our office. So we plan 5 weeks out at a time. And it's like, it has all sorts of little details in it. Like we ran an Airbnb and people have meetings. And so we have this 5-week calendar, which is kind of like that big rocks thing you were talking about. A lot of that's Noelle's handwriting. Unfortunately, she's not here, but her handwriting is. And then we have like the week where we have more detail. And this is in our ranch office. So I think some of the things that we've found, because we're an intergenerational team, like our apprentice this year, Cooper, is in his early 20s, Sam and Noelle are in their early 30s, George is 70, and I'm in my late 60s. So we have people who are digital natives, and we have people on our team who really like pieces of paper. And so in figuring out systems, we've needed to figure out what's a system that's going to work for everybody on the team, given that some of us are old farts and some of us are really digitally comfortable. And so we have some redundancy. So we have this calendar that's up on the wall, and we also use a Google Calendar. So we have a shared Google Calendar, and everything is in both places. And it took George a while to become comfortable with a digital thing, but it's really helped now, because so often you're trying to make decisions about planning when you're not in front of a paper calendar. So I recommend thinking about that also with your team, as you have some people who need a virtual format and some people that need something that's really visual, because that's just the way they learn, or that's the way they process information. And that's that thing about recognizing that, you know, not everybody learns the same way, not everybody processes information the same way. And I think the Oxbow folks really spoke to that as well. One of the other things that we also started doing this year is we've been using WhatsApp. We used to do a lot of texting, and we couldn't figure out which chain, because like somebody's having their day off, and so you don't want to text them on their day off, but the next day somebody else is having their day off, and which text string are you using? So we created a WhatsApp just for our team, which is where we do our morning check-in, because this time of year we don't all end up starting from the same physical location. And so it's a way at 7 o'clock in the morning, everybody is supposed to check in on the WhatsApp so that we know what's going on. We have like Cooper's up on cow camp. So some days we don't even see him for a while, and he doesn't have reception everywhere up there. So we have kind of like a regular check. And that's also something that we learned the hard way, was that George would wake up in the morning and realize that he wanted to completely change the plan for the day. And that could sometimes be really disorienting and frustrating for everybody else on the team, because they wouldn't know until they showed up at work, and they might not have the right gear. They had this plan for their day, and all of a sudden it's being thrown out. And it kind of felt like a power grab for, the leadership, like Bart was saying, as a leader, for you to suddenly decide that you're changing everything, and not when people are used to the decisions being made sort of more democratically, that can really be off-putting and can cause a lot of problems. And so the WhatsApp is a way that if something happens, if the cows are out on the highway, if the water line has failed, if something's happening, we have this moment early enough in the morning where we check in with one another. And that's really helped us deal with some of the things that we were finding causing frustration and difficulty for the team. And, the thing about check-ins, and we do a lot of those kinds of things too. And we do both sort of kind of maybe more what you would call performance review check-ins. But I really think, as the Oxbow folks were saying, that checking in with people as a person, in my mind, is really important. I think that one of the things that I have a real commitment to is having a whole person workplace. When we show up at work, it's not just our strong bodies and the part of our brain that's thinking about stocking days. It's all of us. And so if somebody's having problems in their personal life, if they have an ill parent, if they are having a health issue themselves, if they're struggling some with depression or anxiety, which we all know are things that people in agriculture really struggle with and hesitate to ask for support, I want people to feel like they can come in as all of them. And if we need to figure out a way to adjust the work schedule or the workload in order to help people take care of themselves, I think that's one of the main ways we try to deal with burnout, is try to get ahead of it. So one of the things one year, we haven't done it for a few years, is we actually had a small little whiteboard, and on it, we drew these pictures. So we had like a rain cloud. We had a picture of somebody snoozing with the Z's that are like the little cartoons, somebody's asleep. We had a PMS corner. We had a migraine section. And everybody on the team had a little magnet that was kind of their identity magnet. And when they showed up at work, they just put their magnet on the mood board. And so it was a way for people who might not be comfortable saying that they were having a hard day, or that they hadn't slept well, or that they were having cramps, or whatever the heck it was. Like, they just put their magnet in that corner, and then we kind of knew, and that helped me then as a leader go, okay, this is somebody who's, been in the sleep corner for 5 days. I need to check in with them and find out what's going on. So it was a way to make it sort of safe for people to admit that they were struggling. Because I think that I hear this a lot from apprentices and alumni, is that, ranching is a culture that really values being tough and always being able to rise to the occasion and being really stoic. And so you feel like you have to be like that. And sometimes we aren't like that. And I think that's part of what causes burnout, is feeling that we can't be honest when we aren't as tough as we feel we're supposed to be. And so the mood board was a way for us to kind of deconstruct some of what I think is an unhealthy part of ranching culture. So that's one of the things we've done that helps teams thrive too. I'm looking at my notes to see what other things Oxbow didn't necessarily talk about. One of the things that I'd be really curious if people have questions or ideas, or if Bart and Wendy have thoughts on this. One of the things that I feel we're trying to work on is like the burnout of the leader. I think we're slowly starting to have more awareness of the fact that burnout is something that happens to everybody. But as the people who own and run the ranch, we don't give our time off necessarily. And and if it's a drought or flood or grasshoppers or whatever, you're worried you're not going to make your payment on your loan or your mortgage, or, you've lost some of your best meat customers. We direct market too. Like, these things happen and they weigh really heavily on you. And as the leader, you're the person setting the work culture. And so if you're really stressed, if you're really tense, if you're struggling, even if you don't say a word, that starts to become the culture that everybody else is working in. And my silence as a leader then can actually silence other people who are struggling. And so I don't know that we have a really good solution for that yet. We know we should take more time to take care of ourselves. We don't. And again, I think that's ranching culture. You just kind of get and work as hard as you can, and then collapse in bed, and then get up and do it again. Then you die. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. So I think we need to rethink that culture for the older generation as well as for the younger generation. And I think that's one of the things that the younger generation is helping us recognize, is that we had a mentor in the program a couple of years ago who said, I've never heard the 3 words work-life balance all in a sentence at the same time. And I think we actually need to kind of change that norm for everyone in agriculture. So that's a place where I feel we're really trying to grow as a team. The last thing I think I'll just mention, one thing about the burnout. I think when we start to notice burnout, I'll try to, like if it's an apprentice, I'll go back to like their skill sheet or their interview, and I'll try to find what was their passion point. Why did they want to do this in the first place? And is there a way that I can redesign the workload, or give them a couple of hours once a week to be able to really dive into something that's a passion point that may not be the most important work duty I need them to do, but it's actually one of the most important things for them. And that can be hard in a small team. We're a small team too. But I think that the regeneration and the rejuvenation that any of us experience when we have the opportunity to dive into something that really, really, really is our heart's desire, like, the return fourfold back into, moving fence again for the umpteenth time, I think it can restore you. So I really recommend that we look for those opportunities, those little windows, and even look ahead. Like, I'd almost say that should be one of the rocks we put on our calendar, is like, where in the next 4 weeks does somebody get time for their passion project? I don't do that. It just occurred to me that maybe that would be a way to kind of like get ahead of burnout rather than waiting for it to happen. And then just the last thing I was going to say is a little bit about conflict resilience. I think we talk a lot about conflict resolution. I think sometimes we don't resolve conflicts. Like, we've had teams where like 2 of the people on our team, their work styles were different, their communication styles were different. They really, in spite of being really wonderful people, they drove each other insane. And we had to redesign the workplace so that they basically didn't have to work together very often. And I mean, like, I consulted with, people about all sorts of things and tried to get new tools, and we did all sorts of stuff. But the fact was that we didn't want to let someone go. It wasn't quite that bad. And because I agree with Bart that sometimes you just need to call it, because these were apprentices, we felt like we wanted to support them finishing out their 8 months, but we needed to make some major adjustments and still get the work done. And so I think this is a place where I think for us as leaders to be aware of, like, what are the things that are my triggers around conflict? What are the things that really are hard for me to handle? What am I doing? Where am I taking responsibility? I loved that vow of responsibility. Like, where am I taking responsibility for where I need to grow and learn and become more adaptable and agile in working with people, so that I can support my team doing that. Because I really do feel, I think Bart said it, I think that most of your leading is by being who you are. It's not anything you say. It's not the decisions you make. It's just how you show up every day. And so I think when we're interviewing to hire people, we're looking for people who are self-aware. That's the number one thing we look for. Are they aware of how they impact other people? Are they aware of what causes them stress? Are they aware of when they're stressed? Are they aware of what they need in order to take care of themselves? And I need to be responsible for that as a leader as well. Because if I'm not doing that for myself, I'm going to be putting all of that on my team. So I think that feeds into that conflict resilience. If we're all having that opportunity to explore our passion periodically, and we're all kind of aware of where are my buttons and how easily are they pushed, and can I realize that they've been pushed before I'm like have turned into a maniac, then I'm going to be able to catch myself. And I also think as a leader, making a mistake, acknowledging it, acknowledging where we're growing and learning and failing and trying to do better is some of the best teaching that we can do. So I think those are just kind of some big picture things that I've thought about in relationship to systems and things to try when you realize that you don't have a honeymoon team for every single day.
Yeah, Julia, I was kind of wondering if you could talk about working with, just because you've worked with so many young people, but people who have a hard time taking constructive criticism and get really defensive, how do you work with that as a leader where you're not, if they're super defensive, they put their guard up and they're not listening to you anymore. So how do you, give constructive criticism that they can hear?
That's a really good question. And I think that's something I'm still learning and growing with. I think early on when people first show up, I'll ask them kind of what their experience has been with getting feedback. I start with the assumption that the word feedback itself causes fear and trembling in people. I think most people assume feedback will be criticism and might be unfair. So I kind of say that. I say, my assumption is that most of us, by the time we get to adulthood, have basically had negative experiences with feedback. So tell me a little bit about your negative experiences with feedback. Like, what's been something that was really hard? And is there anything that actually has been helpful? So I'll just ask point blank, because sometimes people really do know. A lot of times they don't. And then I think it really comes down to building that personal trust early on. Like if you've had some shared meals together, if you've taken a walk together, if you've gone huckleberry picking, like whatever it is that you can do in those first 2 months or so, when you're getting to know somebody, to really build that sense. I think both Kara and Natalie spoke to it, like that sense of you're invested in them as a person, not just as a body doing labor for you, but you actually give a damn about who they are. That then I think I almost always preface feedback with, when you first came here, you said that this was, you had this goal that in 2 years you wanted to be managing an operation. I'm making this up, but let's say that was their goal. So that's what you told me. And that one of the reasons you're here is you're wanting to be developing some of that capacity. You want to be moving past being a ranch hand into, learning some things about management and leadership. What I'm seeing is X. What I'm seeing is that we gave you this administrative responsibility and kind of let you know what the expectations and the due dates were, and it's not happening, and I don't understand why that's happening. So I start by kind of asking a question rather than just saying, you're not doing this, and that's frustrating. I'll sort of say, there's this, you had this goal, I gave you this opportunity, and I think I've been clear, which is supposed to help you reach that goal. It doesn't seem like that's working well. Can you explain to me, is it that it's not clear? Is it that you're finding that it's taking more time and you didn't know how to ask? I'll try to ask some leading questions and try to understand what's going on. So I try to start with that. I think it's Stephen Covey says, something like you always start by trying to understand. And so that's the way that I think that you can help disarm a person, is by asking them why what you're seeing doesn't seem to match what you thought they asked for or wanted. And it may be that it's not the right job. It may be that it wasn't something they were ready for. It could be that I didn't explain it well enough. One of the things that we find is that a lot of times people, they have just too much on their plate. And if they're trying to learn, it's 5 times harder to learn something new. So it's more exhausting for them. And so sometimes that's why there's a gap. So that's different. I mean, if it's something where somebody has consistently not been meeting expectations, I think that's a little bit different. But in general, that's where I would start. And if I do that well early on, usually people aren't so reactive to more direct constructive feedback later on. But I think that rosebud thorn is also a place where you can encourage people to have the thorn be talking about places where they feel like they're not reaching their own goal or they're not meeting their own expectations. I think the more you can make it possible for people to name for themselves where they think they're struggling, because that opens the door for you to then sort of further that conversation rather than kind of blast them with it. I see that Bill's hand is up too.
Yes, this has been great. And of course, I have some questions. First, and Wendy, Bart obviously had to get off, but I think this issue of couples that have their stuff, and when other people are around couples that have their stuff, it can be pretty uncomfortable. And it sounds like you guys do a good job with it. I've been married almost 50 years next year, and the passive aggressive stuff that couples do when they're young, which is really obnoxious and really terrible. You don't do that as much. When something blows up, you kind of within 30 seconds you call it. So Wendy and then Julie. So this is the first question. It's like, yeah, when you guys are doing your spouse stuff and you're in the midst of your other group, how quickly do you call yourself up and say, okay, we're just doing our shit here, let's get on with it? How do you guys do that? And then Natalie and Kara, you might say, oh, well, how well do they do that? when they get when either their body language or their just actions are saying, you guys are really going off here, and it's really uncomfortable. How do you guys deal? Because these things happen all the time, and you guys sound like you deal with it pretty well. But I'd like both Julie and Wendy kind of just respond. And how do you do that? How do you manage yourself?
Well, I think we probably gave an impression that we manage ourselves well, but we have the same struggle for sure. I think for Bart and I, we've Julie mentioned patterns, and we've just done some personal work trying to understand our patterns so that when we're in the workplace, we can recognize it and try to interrupt it, because it happens. It does for every couple. And I think you're wise in saying that, the passive aggressive stuff is not as prominent as we age, as is kind of the recognition of just addressing it and moving on. And I think we've adopted something that I think I maybe internalize more than Bart, and helps me apply to the workplace. And that oftentimes we have conflicts because of leadership or wanting to direct the day, or I have an opinion of how it should go and he has an opinion. And the phrase of be the beta, that they're really, when you're in your team and you're working together, there really can only be one leader directing the team at one time. And it can be either of us, but one person has to step back and just recognize, okay, I'm not leading right now, because we both can't lead. And I think that gets confusing for Kara and Natalie sometimes when we're kind of having that dynamic. I think we could do a much better job, as Julie mentioned, of empowering Natalie and Kara or anybody working with us to call it out and see, because sometimes you don't recognize when you're in it until you're in your pattern for a little while. Because I think that would help speed up the resolution of it. So I don't know that we handle it as well as we maybe sounded like we did, but it is a real dynamic, and I'd love actually to hear what Natalie and Kara think about it. I think that self-awareness and continually learning yourself and understanding how you interact and then how that affects the team is what I strive to do. And we have a counselor that helps us do that. And when we're not jiving well, we check in with the counselor and figure out what's going on with our pattern.
So Natalie and Kara, do you have any comments? And then Julie, I'd love to hear how you do this. And Natalie, you might reflect on how many times Dana and I went off and you were sitting there.
I mean, I think maybe a lot of times, I don't know, or one second. okay, like a lot of people in that situation could like maybe, take like what's happening in that couple dynamic, like maybe kind of personally and stuff like that. And like, I feel like I'm not saying that I do, but I'm just saying that like sometimes people think that because these two people are fighting, it has something to do with someone else, And I think Bart and Wendy, like, even though there's some sort of tension or something happening, they never like make it feel or like place blame on really each other or anyone else. It's just like they're dealing with this one thing and it's very quick and then it's just done. Like there's a point of tension, there's a little silence, then it's done. And like no one's to blame, like it happened. And then they always like kind of debrief it and like talk about it, which I think is really good. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I think like working for Bill and Dana and Bart and Wendy and other like another set of couples before I did this. I mean, it's just part of the deal. If like you're all the young people on the call, like if you work in agriculture, inevitably you're gonna have to work for a couple. It's just part of it all. And inevitably they're gonna fight and it's gonna be awkward and you're gonna think it's your fault and it's just gonna be not fun. But I think like, I don't know, I guess the only way I found to deal with it is to just remove myself from it. And Wendy, like I hear you, like, and sometimes I have gotten involved, but it's really hard for me to get involved. And like, I definitely hear you and I know what you're talking about, but like for me to persevere and like do this and maintain relationships with working or with my bosses who are couples, like I just have to stay out of it and ignore it. And sometimes it's good because I'm like, I want to like continue to work and I like to work by myself. So I'm just going to continue to work while you guys figure it out. And this is not just for Bart and Wendy or Bill and Dana. And I mean, I've also been lucky enough to work for like, in my opinion, all of you guys fight about dumb stuff. It's not like you're in the middle of like talking about really serious stuff while we're moving cows. And they're like, I wanted to rope fur. I wanted to get the head shot. It's like silly. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna put my head down and ignore it. And the same for Bill and Dana.
Great, Julie. So
Well,
how well do you manage it?
Well, I would say that sometimes pretty well, and sometimes it's a real mess. I'll be really honest. I would say this is a place that I think is challenging. And I also want to name that I think that this is true for like ranches where it's like two brothers who are running it. Or so I think that ranches that have a lot of family working together. Like when I hear George talk about when he was working with his dad, and then when he and his brother were working with his dad, and then when he and his brother ran the ranch, like a lot of what George and I go through are things that they actually went through too. Like I think sometimes there's the added dimension of it being a married couple, but to some extent, it's just the fact that they're like, it's like there's 5 relationships in the room, but there's only 2 people. Like I'm the financial manager and he's the cattle boss and, and I'm the wife and he's the husband and I'm the educator and he's the, it's like, there's way too many people in the conversation, but it's only 2 bodies in the conversation. And I think one of the things that I think I've been just doing lately is actually like naming, if we're in a team meeting, George is one of the people that tends to need a timekeeper. He'd be the first one to mention that. So it's okay for me to say that in public. And I'll be aware of the fact that you could sort of see other people starting to drift off during the meeting. And so I'll want to step in as a facilitator and kind of like bring us back to the point. I'll name. So one of the things I'm starting to do is I'll say, I'm putting on my like I have my facilitator hat on now. I do not have my wife hat on. And if I know that there are places where we're going to have a disagreement, and we have a lot of disagreements, and sometimes we can air those publicly in a meeting in a really good way, and sometimes we don't. So I think if I'm aware of the fact that there's a place where either in our personal relationship, we're having some issues, or there's something coming up that's a ranch related thing where we're going to have some strong differences of opinion, I'll have a conversation before the team arrives in the morning. And I'll actually say, okay, like right now I'm a wife. Right now I'm your beloved partner and I care about you. And these are the things I'm seeing or thinking. And what do you think? And then I'll say, okay, now I'm putting on my facilitator hat. And these are the 4 things that I think need to happen in the meeting. And you're not going to like all of those. But as a facilitator of my team, this is what I think needs to happen. So I think that that's helping us a lot. It's just trying to name for each other more overtly when we're in which role. So that's helping, I think. I think one of the things that we've been a little messy about is on any given team, some years, one of us will feel a real affinity for one of the younger people working for us. And we can kind of sometimes cross the line into kind of taking that person on a little bit more as a confidant. So like there've been a couple of situations where some of the things that I find frustrating and difficult about working with George are things that the apprentice also found frustrating and difficult. And they would be talking to me about it. And I would kind of say, yeah, that's hard for me too. And that's, I think, been a hard line for me to pay attention to. I think the idea of having some sort of counselor, whether that's, somebody, if you're in Ranching for Profit on your executive, on your EL board, or a friend or an actual counselor, I think that's a really good idea. Some sort of neutral party that can help you air that. I think, and we're just really honest about it. Like if I know that George and I have kind of had a little squabble in a team meeting, I will check in with everybody else on the team, usually within 24 hours. And I'll say, that was probably uncomfortable. That was messy. If you want to ask me any questions about that or talk to us about it, let me know. And then when we do our check-ins, particularly with people who've worked here for a long time, like Sam and Noelle, when we do our kind of more personal check-ins, we'll always ask about that. And we'll ask them about how they're doing as a couple and what kind of support do they need from us? Like, do they need to not work together much for a week or two, so they just get a little breathing space, so they're not working together and then going home together, so I think there's that too. It's not just us, but it's the fact that then we have a couple who are also working for us and they have their stuff that bleeds over into the team. And so if we start to notice that in them, we'll ask them what kind of support would be beneficial for them. And try to, again, like really practical, change the way we're dividing up workload and stuff like that, so they get some breathing space from each other.
Thanks.
So I don't know how well that answers your question.
No, I mean, there's no good answer, but this question, actually, anyone on the call could respond to. But so I think when I was younger, and Natalie knows, our longtime employee, Ryan McCleary, an employer could have this expectation, or worse, an assumption about what needed to get done, but has no idea all the circumstances that might have occurred that prevented that person from getting that thing done. And you begin in your brain building up this case. In fact, you start bringing up other shit that happened maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And so you start making this case in your head, and it's all delusion, but you make the case nevertheless. And that just sets you up when you finally try and confront the person based on this case you've made that is totally inaccurate. It doesn't turn out well. Over the years, I've learned to create a lot of space about, well, I might not know why this happened, and maybe I'll just keep my mouth shut and see, and not worry about it for a while. But when two people working, whether it's an employer or employee, start building a case based on an assumption of what the other person's either thinking or they think they did, it really leads to not very good outcomes. And great teams, and you guys, because of your level of communication, that probably doesn't experience doesn't occur very much. But that always lingers in human beings. Human beings are always finding fault with other people, and often people they're close to, if they're not too developed, which is about mostly a good share of the human beings on the planet. That's why we're always fighting so much. But so I guess a question, and it could be other apprentices on the call, is like, your mentor shows up and starts saying, well, what in the hell are you doing this for? And they don't know all the other things that might have occurred in that day that prevented you from doing the thing you were supposed to do. And vice versa, and just how you've trained yourself, or maybe not trained yourself, to catch that before you build this huge case that's built on air, and yet it might cause a feud that'll last for a week if you are not good about catching it. So, Wendy or Joy or Natalie or Tara, maybe this has occurred with you guys. And usually it's body language body language does more than anything else in terms of making us figure out things aren't going so well. But I'm just curious how people get through and train themselves not to react on assumptions that usually are built on sand. And so I open that up to anyone, really. But maybe you guys that are you guys are on target here because you're presenting. Maybe you guys could start, and if you guys don't have any response, that's cool too. But this is probably the most painful thing I experienced in my early years as an employer, is making false assumptions and then creating havoc.
Yeah, Bart, Wendy, and myself ran into that a lot this past winter. We were all dealing with like a lot of personal yuckiness and like all the things I assumed were untrue, and then led to like a bit of a deterioration of our team and then our work and stuff. But I think like to fix it, what we did was communicate, and then part of Bart's talking tos are like, and Wendy is like the vow of responsibility. It's like everybody is going through something, and yet you're still an employee here, and we still expect this of you. So like for me, like them being able to, for me to say my side, like, well, I'm dealing with this and this and this, and I just wanted to give you guys space for this reason and yada yada. They're like, oh, okay, like thank you, and like they're really compassionate and empathetic, but there's still like the vow of responsibility where it's like, well, you need to also get your job done, So I don't know, like I guess I see both sides of the coin, and I think Bart and Wendy both do a good job of that, being compassionate, but also holding me to my expectations, because we all have all this stuff going on, and it's never not going to be going on, I guess.
Thank you.
Something that I would, I wish George was on the call, because I'd be interested in hearing what he has to say about how he's worked with this. I think some of it is just getting older and realizing how wrong you are most of the time, and like the humility of aging. That helps a lot. In part because I think you're not needing to prove yourself in the same way that I think we often feel like we need to, like that need to be in charge, and that need to know, and that need to be in control, and all of that I think gets really reinforced when we're young. I think that some of that just like, we just know we're going to blow it a lot. And so we know that. But one of the things that I found really helpful actually came from Brene Brown's work in her book, Dare to Lead, and her podcast. And she has this thing where she'll say, the story I'm telling myself about what's going on is X. And I think that's such a great opening, because I think if you think someone's screwing up, or you don't understand why it took them 5 hours to, build a 1/4 mile of fence or whatever the heck it was, like you do need to know, like, was there a major issue? Were they on, Instagram the whole time? Like what really was going on here? but trying to find a way to ask that question, like you're saying, Bill, that doesn't allow your imagination to run away with you and doesn't, and kind of catches the accusation, like asks for an explanation without having character assassination included in the mix. And I think that's tricky. And so that thing of figuring out just how to start the conversation is really hard. And I think Brene Brown has some really, really good leads. And one of them is that the story I'm telling myself. So the story I'm telling myself is that, you know, you went out to build a 1/4 mile of fence and came back 5 hours later. And I don't understand why that took you 5 hours. So could you tell me what all was going on? And who knows? But I think that is what I'm starting to try to do. I think I've tended to fault on being too nice and not being as holding people as feet to the fire as much as I should have. And I think George has erred on the other side. So I think that's also confusing when you have 2 mentors or 2 bosses and they have really different styles with that kind of a thing. And I think we're trying to find that middle ground with the ask the leading question. So that would be my recommendation at this point. Because you do need to get to the bottom of it. If there is something going on that's either a safety issue or a lack of, I think a lot of times we think we've been clear in our instructions and we aren't. And people don't know how to tell us that we weren't clear.
Thank you.
I appreciate what you said, Julie, and reflect a little bit of that. And I have kind of a unique role in that I'm, you know, not ranching day to day with everybody all the time. And so I kind of am in and out. So I'll have a day of work at the hospital and then I'll come into Oxbow and understand what the plan was for the day. And then it's not nearly where I expected it to be, or, you know, visual, like things accomplished or not accomplished. And so I can create that story in my head of, you know, what I think happened. And so after, mostly with Bart, putting my foot in my mouth several times about why didn't this and this get done, I've learned to ask a question first, like, you know, how did the day go? And, you know, tell me what happened first before I lob onto that story that I have in my head. The other thing that I try to do is I try to really kind of check in with what feeling it's creating for me, because those stories we tell, you know, your thoughts can create your feelings. And so, you know, what feeling is it creating for me, and check in with my body. And then why is that a problem for me? And then what thoughts are creating those feelings for me? And so if it is a story going on in my head, and checking in, like trying to just reconnect with both of those things to understand why this is causing me issues. Why is it, you know, creating this emotion? And that allows me to listen before I talk, and to understand what happened for them. You know, why didn't this thing get done? And ask a question and listen to understand, not to tell, because I have a tendency, especially with Bart, to do that. And by doing all of those things, I can see either opportunities sometimes, like it wasn't a clear communication of what really the priority of the day was, or how to accomplish something. I try to work on efficiency a lot and just talk through like processes and systems, and you know, are we all on the same page? Can we do things more efficient? But definitely I think stopping and listening first, even when that story is going on in your head, to allow them to tell their story, and then making sense of that in the context of whatever's happening.
Good stuff from all of you. Thank you.
Anyone else? We have a few more minutes if you have any lingering questions. If not, I'm just really grateful for the Oxbow team, and Julie, thank you for coming and sharing with us. It can be really vulnerable. sharing what your team does right and wrong. And so I really appreciate you being honest and yeah, being a part of this with us. And just thank you to everyone who showed up tonight and gave these guys your attention. We really appreciate you as well. Yeah, with that, good night, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your week.
Thanks. Good night.
You, thanks for putting this on.